Hi guys! Today I want to tell you about this super fun Christmas tree project that I've been working on lately. This is one that I made extra of for my Christmas markets. I sold several of these trees at my first market, and by the time this video posts, I will be selling at my second market. Wish me luck, as it's an all-day market in a very busy mall. It's both exciting and very intimidating. Like any other pottery project, this project started with wedging and weighing some clay. These trees took about 1.5 pounds of clay. I got those all wedged up to get the clay nice and workable. I wasn't too concerned about getting them exactly the same size, so I wasn't super exact with measuring, but they're about the same weight of clay. Sometimes exactness matters, and frequently it does not. The next step was to throw the trees on the pottery wheel. These are a particularly tricky shape as they're closed form, meaning that they're closed at the top, unlike, say, a mug, which is open at the top. These are also open on the bottom. Sometimes it takes me a couple mistakes to get it down, and because I don't normally throw closed form for most of my pieces. So I had a couple flops out early on, and that's okay. By far the majority of the pieces turned out great. I threw these by centering and then opening all the way to the bat. Then I pulled up the wall as high as I could comfortably get them. And then I colored them back in until they closed back up. The closing it back up is by far the trickiest part, as it tries to go all wonky sometimes, but I managed it, and then I used a rib to shape it into more of a Christmas tree shape. For some of these, I added some wavy lines with my finger, and for a lot of them, I left them more plain. I wanted them to all be different because, well, variety is awesome. After throwing them all, I let them dry for a couple days. Things always dry slower in the winter, so this part took a little bit. Once they were all dry, I carved them and added holes using my little hole punch tools. I used a few different sizes for some variety and interest, and I added the holes randomly throughout. I also carved most of the trees. Some I left plain with just the holes, and some I had added texture to when I was throwing them. I really enjoy adding different textures and carvings and just playing around with different designs. I love making things unique. I left the trees on the bat while I was carving and adding holes to them. That way they had some added stability. Then after I was done with the decoration, I wired them off the bat and cleaned up the base of them. I used a rasp and an X-Acto knife to take off the extra clay around the base, and then I smoothed them with a sponge. After the trees were all full of holes and carved, I added the stars on top. I did this by rolling out a slab and using a couple different sizes of cookie cutters to cut out the stars. I find that adding plastic wrap over the top of the slab before cutting it is really helpful to get nice rounded edges, and the clay doesn't stick to the cookie cutter, so win-win. I cut some small lengths of high fire wire and then added them to the trees and then placed the stars on top, so that the wire was going through the tops of the trees and through the center of the stars. I hadn't tried this before, and I wasn't entirely sure this would work without the stars falling over and melting to the trees as they were fired, because the wire can bend a little as it is when it is hot, but it worked out great. Well, do I take risks in pottery? Yes, I do. I absolutely do, but it either works out or hey, I learned something. And in this case, it worked out great, and I really like the kind of floating look to the stars with them being not directly attached to the trees. After that, it was time for them to dry once again. This time they needed to dry all the way so they wouldn't explode in the kiln. This waiting was one of the harder parts for me this time because I had a bit of a time limit with my markets coming up, and so it was slightly nerve-wracking waiting while wondering if I would have enough time to finish them before my first market. And because they're super cute, but I really don't need 20 of them to keep. Thankfully, I finished them a few days before my first market, and I've already sold a few. After they were fired in the kiln for the first time, I breathed a sigh of relief because none of them exploded. Realistically, I've only ever had 2 things explode ever, but it's always a little bit of concern. I've just recently started getting into mixing up my own glazes, so I tried something else that I've never done before. Another untested risk? Of course! I mixed up a clear base glaze and then added a bit of green mason stain, then dipped a few trees. Then I added more mason stain and dipped a few more trees. I repeated this a few times so I had various shades of green for the trees, but I couldn't tell exactly how green they would be until they were fired. Worked great for adding some variety, and I got to dip them all, which is infinitely easier than brush-on glazes. So after that, I glazed the stars, this time with a yellow glaze that I'd purchased. This was a brush-on glaze, but the stars were tiny, so it didn't take terribly long. I did 3 coats of that glaze, and then they were ready to go back into the kiln. After another longer, hotter trip into the kiln, they were all done, and they look so fabulous! I'm super happy with how they turned out. I love the vibrant colors and the color variety, and they turned out amazing. They got quite a few compliments at my first market, and I even sold a few of them. I'm hoping to sell the rest at my next market because, again, I don't need 20 of them. Though I did definitely keep one for me. And look how fabulous they look with a light in them. These markets are so far out of my comfort zone, but it's cool to get some compliments and to have people excited about some of my work. Plus, I've accumulated an amazing amount of pottery that I've made, so it's good to put that in the hands of people who appreciate it rather than keeping it on a shelf in my studio. If you want to be notified of my next upcoming restock online, you can go to my website and join my newsletter. But either way, be sure to check out this video next, and thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.